Market to Market is everywhere you are. Subscribe to Market on YouTube, find us on the PBS video app to stream on demand, and add our 3 podcasts on your favorite podcasting app. Darren Cadlick farms in northeast North Dakota's Walsh County, which last year had the distinction of being the U.S. county with the most land planted to dry edible beans, at about 100,000 acres. His father brought pinto beans to their farm in the Red River Valley in the 1970s, but Cadlick, the 4th generation on the land, is unlikely to give it up.
Dry beans fit the bill to diversify into raise another crop. It's a great rotation crop. It fixes some nitrogen in the ground, is beautiful the next year for the following crop like spring wheat. It's a different way to break the weed cycle. You use different herbicides. And then the climate fits incredibly well right here.
Cadlick will quickly point out that there are challenges, such as pinto beans' preference for cooler climates, their dislike of too much moisture, and the lack of futures contracts that could make for increased price discovery.
It's a specialty market, so it's much more volatile. Contracts do exist where you can contract a percentage of your crop, and then you have the open market on the backside. The export is what can really add to the volatility. Let's say a country like Mexico comes in, they can buy a significant amount of beans and clean up a carryover in a very short amount of time.
Dry beans are just one of the pulse crops, defined as legumes with edible seeds that are harvested dry, to have gradually gained acreage in the United States. Besides dry beans, other pulse crops now grown on about 1 million acres each include lentils and dry peas, and briefly, chickpeas before production dropped. Some pulse crops have seen acreage level off in the last few years. The trend is expected to continue this spring with the war in Ukraine and other factors pushing farmers toward oil-producing crops like canola, soybeans, and sunflowers. However, experts say the family of edible seeds shows potential for additional growth, particularly dry peas and black beans.
COVID hit and people realized that beans were part of being a staple food, and there was an incredible amount of inventory that got moved on top of a little bit shorter supply. So we chewed through the carryover relatively quickly.
Weather events in North Dakota, including a large snowstorm during the 2019 harvest, pulled down supply just as demand was about to spike.
When the pandemic hit, of course, dry goods were one of the first things that flew off the shelf. Our inventory was gone. We totally sold out. The good thing was in 2020, we had the largest crop on record, so we were able to replenish that stock. But it was scary because we've never had it where every bean we had on the shelf gone.
Coulter said the United Kingdom's recent agreement to drop a 25% retaliatory trade tariff on dry beans should help boost sales. The industry has also seen more dry beans and dry peas, with their high protein and fiber, being used in plant-based meat alternatives and beverages.
We've seen a lot more interest in dry beans once they started looking into plant-based proteins, or flexitarian diets where they're blending plant-based protein with meat products.
Central Valley Bean Cooperative in Buxton, North Dakota, offers farmers contracts and annually processes and markets about 1.2 million 100-pound bags of dry beans. The company deals almost exclusively in pintos, which are the type typically used in refried beans. The recent volatility with pricing following weather disasters and global events isn't new to General Manager Dan Fugliston.
It's wild. Probably by all accounts, 20 production was a record on acres and volume. And the market dropped from, say, a $40 grower to a $24 grower per hundredweight price, which is pretty significant. And then as last year's drought was developing throughout the winter, the market started coming up, and we've hit $50 now this year.
That $50 is considered near record pricing for the industry. Fugliston said there is some concern, though, that the industry may be limited by the supply of dry bean seed, which is raised almost exclusively in Idaho and Wyoming. Although farmers are legally allowed to keep and replant some of their harvested dry beans, industry leaders are concerned the genetics may not be as strong.
Seed becomes a talking point on limiting acreage. A lot of growers are only interested in growing dry beans if they can get a certain seed that they want. On years where there's good demand for seed, there's only so much that can get grown.
Plant breeders at North Dakota State University are working on developing dry pea, lentil, and chickpea cultivars that perform well statewide rather than just farther west.
I think the future will be, we're hoping to bring pulses here in the east as well. And yeah, that would be exciting.
Bandilio expects the availability of genetic information and cameras that more precisely identify plant diseases to help speed up the development of new options for the region.
And that's why we need to use molecular tools so that we could, breed crops in a more precise way.
In the last 4 years, North Dakota State University's Pulse Breeding Program has released a new variety of yellow pea, chickpea, and green pea. Developing a new cultivar can take 10 years, but Bandilio said the work should become faster.
Everybody talks about these 9 billion people by 2050, right? But nobody talks about this growing demand for pulse crops. I would expect, a linearly increasing trend on the demand for pulses.
For Market to Market, I'm Colleen Bradford Krantz.